9 ancient discoveries, buried for centuries that were just found. Shocking scientists. Hello and welcome to the Ancient History Channel. My friend, when we look back at the history of humanity, there is one fascinating truth. The deeper people dig into the ground, the more clearly they begin to understand their own past. And that is exactly why archaeology has always been seen as a journey full of surprising discoveries. Over the course of hundreds of years, this field of science has made remarkably significant progress. From the crude tools used in its earliest days to the advanced technologies used today, archaeologists have gradually opened doors into the ancient world. A world filled with countless mysteries that time once tried to bury. Along the way, many discoveries have left the entire world astonished. Sometimes they are long-forgotten treasures buried for thousands of years, artifacts so valuable and extraordinary that it is hard to believe they truly existed in such distant times. At other times, they are mummies preserved almost perfectly, lying silently beneath the earth for thousands of years while still maintaining an astonishingly intact appearance. But perhaps one of the most fascinating things for archaeologists is the discovery of ancient tombs. Each tomb is not only the final resting place of the deceased, but also like a history book that has never been opened. These tombs sometimes contain strange burial rituals, mysterious grave goods, or even stories that send chills down the spine of modern people when they learn about them. In the past few years, archaeologists around the world have been working almost non-stop. They carefully dig through layer after layer of soil, patiently piecing together even the smallest clues in order to decode the past. As a result, a series of astonishing discoveries has gradually come to light. Ancient structures long buried underground, mysterious mummies, and numerous tombs that hold stories both thrilling and unsettling from thousands of years ago. So what secrets are still lying beneath the earth that humanity has only just begun to uncover? And why have some of these discoveries forced scientists to reconsider parts of history? All of these mysteries will slowly be revealed in the journey of exploration that begins right now. Are you ready to explore with me? If you are, then let's begin with the very first discovery. 2,000-year-old bread prison in Pompeii reveals a terrifying secret that shocked archaeologists. Hidden beneath the layers of ash from the ancient city of Pompeii, buried after the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79, archaeologists from Pompeii Archaeological Park recently stunned the research community when they excavated a little-noticed area known as Region 9, Insula 10, located near the slope of the ancient city. At first glance, the site looked no different from the countless ruined walls scattered throughout Pompeii. But according to the archaeologists, the deeper they dug, the more each layer of soil and stone began to reveal a story that would send chills down anyone's spine. Gradually, a strange ancient architectural complex emerged before their eyes. It consisted of small, cramped rooms connected to one another like a dark maze. These rooms had almost no windows facing the outside. On the walls, there were only a few tiny openings positioned high near the ceiling, and each of them was sealed with thick iron bars. The first impression of this structure did not resemble a house, nor did it look like an ordinary workshop. Instead, it looked more like a prison. Because of that, archaeologists became extremely curious about what this place had actually been used for. They began conducting detailed research and analysis. After many months of examining the architectural remains, labor tools, and traces of daily activity left behind, the archaeologists reached a shocking conclusion. This place had once been a bread prison, operating around AD 79, just before Pompeii was wiped out by the volcano. At this point, many people might wonder, why would bread making require a prison? That was exactly the same question everyone asked, even the archaeologists themselves at first. But the truth behind it was far more brutal than it initially appeared. Inside this complex, the rooms were extremely cramped, with low ceilings and only faint light filtering in through small openings. There were no signs of normal living conditions, no courtyard, no real living space, and no area meant for a proper daily life. This was a place where enslaved laborers were confined, people forced to work day and night grinding grain and producing bread for the city. What particularly caught the attention of archaeologists were the remains of large stone grinding mills that were still in place. These mills did not operate with machines like modern equipment. Instead, they had to be turned through continuous pulling force, and to do this, the ancient Romans used blindfolded donkeys. Just imagine the scene. Inside a dark room, donkeys had their eyes covered so they would not realize they were walking in an endless circle. They were forced to take heavy steps around the grinding mill for hours, sometimes day and night, crushing grain into flour. Beside them were enslaved workers, both men and women, living and working in the same suffocating space. They had to push the mills while also controlling the donkeys, occasionally whipping them to force them to keep moving. Just thinking about it is horrifying. But that was not the end of their work. The enslaved workers also had to constantly pour more grain into the mills, wait for the flour to be ground, then shovel it out and prepare the next batch. The cycle repeated endlessly, day after day, in an environment with almost no light, no freedom, and no hope. Even more disturbing, archaeological evidence suggests that humans and animals lived together in these same rooms. They slept there, worked there, and almost never stepped outside the world beyond those cold stone walls. Terrifying, isn't it? This discovery has opened an entirely new perspective on the society of ancient Rome. When people usually think about ancient Rome, they imagine magnificent arenas, monumental architecture, and a brilliant civilization. But hidden behind that glory was a brutal labor system, where people at the lowest levels of society were turned into tools to serve the needs of the city. And perhaps the most thought-provoking idea is this. When the volcanic disaster struck in AD 79, it is very possible that the people inside this bread prison were still turning the grinding mills as they did every day, completely unaware that history was about to freeze the final moments of their lives forever beneath the ashes of Pompeii. What do you think about this truth that has just been revealed? Do you find it cruel? Feel free to share your thoughts by leaving a comment below this video. 2,600-year-old tomb, containing rare treasures found completely intact. In the historic lands of Italy, a region that once served as the cradle of many brilliant civilizations throughout human history, archaeologists have recently made a discovery that has greatly excited the research community. The discovery began when they were conducting a survey at an archaeological site in central Italy. During the investigation, they unexpectedly uncovered a remarkable ancient tomb belonging to the mysterious civilization known as the Etruscan civilization. What makes this discovery so astonishing is not only its age, but also the fact that it has remained almost completely intact for more than 2 millennia. According to initial dating results, the tomb is about 2,600 years old, dating back to around the 7th century BC. At first glance, that may seem like just a number, but if you imagine the world at that time, many civilizations were still in their early stages of development. Yet in central Italy, the Etruscans had already built advanced communities with unique art, beliefs, and elaborate burial rituals. The newly discovered tomb clearly reflects that culture. Rather than being a simple burial pit, the entire structure was carved directly into rock. Even more interesting is that it was shaped to resemble a small house. When archaeologists entered the tomb, they realized that the interior space had been designed like a miniature living room where the deceased were laid to rest as if they were sleeping inside their own home. Inside the tomb, researchers discovered the skeletal remains of 4 individuals, carefully placed on finely carved stone beds. Preliminary studies suggest that these individuals included 2 men and 2 women, who were most likely members of the same family or lineage. The way their remains were arranged indicates that they were buried with respect and ceremonial care, reflecting the Etruscan belief in the afterlife. But the story does not end there. As archaeologists continued examining the surroundings, they gradually realized that the tomb resembled a forgotten historical treasure vault. Surrounding the 4 skeletons were more than 100 ancient artifacts, each with its own story to tell. Among these objects were finely crafted pottery, ancient weapons, bronze jewelry, and even silver hair accessories, items that had once been part of the everyday lives of the people buried there. Just by looking at the number and variety of these artifacts, researchers were able to imagine the social status of those buried in the tomb. They may have been quite important individuals within the Etruscan community of their time. What makes this discovery even more extraordinary is the rare condition in which the tomb was found. Over many decades of archaeological excavations in the region, experts have uncovered numerous tombs from the Etruscan civilization. However, most of them had already been looted by tomb robbers hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Valuable items had long since disappeared. This tomb, however, was completely different. It had remained sealed for thousands of years, almost untouched by both ancient and modern humans. Because of that, everything inside remained nearly in its original position, almost exactly as it was when the last Etruscans closed the tomb. According to archaeologist Davide Zori from Baylor University in the state of Texas, United States, an intact Etruscan tomb like this is extremely rare in archaeology. The reason is that such preservation allows scientists to observe the entire Etruscan burial ritual almost exactly as it originally occurred, without major disturbance from time. Of course, the research has only just begun. In the coming months, scientists will continue conducting detailed analyses of the skeletal remains. Through these studies, they hope to learn more about the individuals' ages, diets, diseases, and possibly even the causes of their deaths. When we talk about the Etruscans, we are referring to a civilization that once flourished in central Italy many centuries before the rise of the Roman civilization. Around the 6th century BC, this civilization reached the height of its prosperity. However, as history unfolded, a series of wars with the Romans gradually weakened them. Eventually, by the 1st century BC, all Etruscan territories had been officially absorbed into the Roman state. Yet even though their civilization disappeared long ago, tombs like this one have quietly remained beneath the earth, waiting for the day they would be opened, so they could finally tell the story of a civilization that was once magnificent, yet still filled with mystery in the history of humanity. 500 ancient Egyptian tombs reveal a surprising truth about the origins of the pharaoh religion. For many years, people believed that the religion centered on the worship of the kings of ancient Egypt, often called the pharaoh religion, was created and shaped by the power of the kings and influential priests. However, when researchers began digging deeper into ancient cemeteries located along the banks of the Nile River, the real story began to unfold in a completely different direction. According to a study published in the scientific journal of Archaeological Method and Theory, an international team of scientists conducted a survey of more than 500 ancient tombs at the Adaima Cemetery, an ancient burial site located in the Nile Valley. And it was precisely at this place, which seemed at first to be nothing more than the cemetery of ordinary rural communities, that they discovered clues about the true origins of the pharaoh religion. It may sound surprising, but the research results suggest that religious beliefs once thought to originate from kings actually grew out of the very simple burial customs of ordinary people. This idea directly contradicts the long-standing belief that ancient Egyptian religion was imposed from the ruling class down onto the population. Just think about it. For thousands of years, pharaohs were considered almost divine figures. They were not merely kings, they were seen as the bridge between humans and the world of the gods, the holders of sacred authority over both heaven and earth. Because of this, many scholars once assumed that Egypt's complex religious rituals must have been created by powerful elites. That would seem like the obvious explanation. Yet the tombs at Adaima tell a different story. This cemetery was used from around 3300 BC to 2700 BC, long before pharaohs ruled Egypt and even before the giant pyramids appeared in the desert. That means the burial rituals practiced there may have formed when Egyptian society still consisted mainly of early agricultural communities. Under the leadership of archaeologist Ameline Alcouf from University of Toulouse, the research team discovered that many of the tombs in this cemetery were arranged according to remarkably precise astronomical patterns. This suggests that ancient Egyptians possessed an impressive knowledge of the sky from a very early time. One of the most striking discoveries is Tomb S166. Inside it were the remains of a young woman buried with an extremely unusual ritual. Her left arm had been ceremonially removed and placed across her chest. Not only that, but the tomb itself was positioned precisely in alignment with the sunset on the winter solstice. Even more astonishing, her coffin was aligned with Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, which the ancient Egyptians viewed as a sign announcing the annual flooding of the Nile. The discoveries did not stop there. Two other tombs also revealed unusual connections with the sky. One of them, Tomb S837, contained the remains of a woman buried with delicate jewelry and a broken ceramic vessel, suggesting symbolic burial rituals. Another, Tomb S874, held the body of another woman buried with a staff and a fiber wig. The position of this tomb was arranged according to the summer solstice. Researchers refer to these special tombs as cultural ignition points. After these tombs were constructed, many other graves gradually appeared around them, as if the local people regarded them as sacred locations. Over time, these burial places may have evolved into early forms of shrines. influencing the rituals and beliefs of the wider community. What becomes even more fascinating as research continues is that many core elements of later Egyptian religion, funerary rituals, astronomical beliefs, and the idea of a connection between humans and the cosmos appear to trace their origins back to these very early folk traditions. So far, scientists have identified more than 900 tombs within the Adaima cemetery, spread across an area of over 74 acres. This makes it one of the oldest and most extensively studied burial complexes in the history of ancient Egypt. And perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this discovery is the realization that what was once considered the sacred power of kings may actually have begun with the simple beliefs of farmers living along the Nile thousands of years ago. It is a story that reminds us that history is not always written from the heights of power. Sometimes it begins within the most ordinary communities. Fascinating, isn't it? The remains of a pregnant woman in an ancient Egyptian tomb reveal a 3,700-year-old tragedy. In the ancient town of Ambo in southern Egypt, experts from the Supreme Council of Antiquities recently announced a remarkable discovery: the skeletal remains of a pregnant woman dating back about 3,700 years. This discovery was not the result of a random excavation. Instead, it was part of a collaborative archaeological project involving researchers from Italy and the United States. At the time, the archaeological team was surveying an ancient cemetery located near desert routes in southern Egypt. During their work, they came across a small tomb lying quietly beneath the ground. At first, no one expected that it contained a story that would provoke such deep reflection. According to preliminary research, this cemetery had been used between 1750 BC and 1550 BC. It served as a burial ground for people who once lived in or traveled through the vast deserts of ancient Egypt, especially traders and travelers passing through the region. When the tomb was opened, archaeologists discovered the remains of a young woman. After analyzing the bones, they estimated that she died at around 25 years old. But what immediately caught everyone's attention was one extraordinary detail. Inside her body were the skeletal remains of a fetus. Just imagine that. For nearly 4 millennia, the mother and her unborn child had remained together in the same tomb, as if time had frozen the final moment of their lives. What does this detail suggest? To answer that question, scientists began conducting careful examinations and analyses. They discovered that the fetus was positioned with its head pointing toward the mother's pelvis. This is a position commonly seen in babies during the final 3 months of pregnancy, when the body is preparing for birth. Because of this detail, experts proposed the hypothesis that the woman may have died shortly before giving birth or during labor. Her body had been wrapped in a burial shroud made of leather, a form of burial that was fairly common in certain ancient Egyptian communities during that period. Beside the mother were 2 ceramic vessels, which may once have contained food, water, or items meant to accompany her on the journey to the afterlife, according to ancient Egyptian beliefs. Although the tomb itself was quite simple, the discovery carries significant scientific importance. According to researchers, the remains of pregnant women are extremely rare in ancient archaeology. Because of this, each discovery like this helps scientists better understand the lives and the dangers that women faced in ancient times. Among those commenting on the discovery was Sandra Wheeler from the University of Central Florida. She explained that finding the remains of a woman who died during pregnancy is exceptionally rare. This discovery highlights how childbirth in the ancient world often involved great risks and how the danger of dying during childbirth was something many women had to face. Unfortunately, over time, the soft tissues of the body have not survived. This has made it difficult for scientists to determine the exact cause of the young mother's death. However, the position of the fetus alone has already provided an important clue about what may have happened during the final moments of her life. Because of that, this discovery is more than just another ancient tomb. It is like a vivid fragment of history, reminding us that behind the Great Pyramids and the stories of powerful kings in ancient Egypt, there were also countless ordinary people with their own lives, hopes, and personal tragedies. And sometimes, a single small tomb resting quietly beneath the sand for nearly 3,700 years is enough to tell a story powerful enough to make the whole world pause and listen. The real face of a 2,500-year-old Egyptian princess mummy that shocked experts. Did you know that among the thousands of artifacts preserved in museums around the world, There are sometimes objects that seem to have slept quietly for thousands of years, until one day modern science suddenly awakens their stories. This time, that story begins with an ancient coffin displayed at the Perth Museum in the city of Perth, Scotland. Inside the coffin are the remains of a woman who lived about 2,500 years ago, a person who once existed in the magnificent yet mysterious world of ancient Egypt. For many decades, this coffin was simply regarded as an ordinary archaeological artifact in the museum's collection. People only knew that it contained the mummy of a woman, but what her real face looked like, where she came from, or what kind of life she lived, all of those questions remained unanswered. That changed recently when scientists decided to apply modern research technologies to study the mummy more closely. Only then did the identity of this mysterious woman begin to emerge. One of the specialists involved in this unique project was Chris Rinn, a well-known expert in craniofacial anthropology and forensic science. Using X-ray imaging, skull structure analysis, and anatomical data, he and his colleagues began the process of reconstructing a 3D model of the ancient woman's face. In simple terms, they were trying to answer a question many people might also be curious about. What did a woman who lived 2.5 millennia ago actually look like? As the skull analysis progressed, scientists noticed a very interesting detail. The shape of this woman's skull did not match the typical skull structure of ancient Egyptians, often referred to as the Kemetic people. Normally, Kemetic skulls are long and narrow, with a prominent nasal bridge and a relatively elongated face. However, the skull structure of the woman in the coffin displayed noticeably different characteristics. After completing the facial reconstruction, the research team proposed a rather surprising hypothesis. The woman might not have been native Egyptian. Instead, she may have come from the kingdom of Kush, an ancient kingdom that once existed in the region of present-day Sudan. According to the analysis, she may have been a Kushite woman with dark skin, belonging to a civilization that maintained close ties with ancient Egypt. The kingdom of Kush was once one of the major powers of the ancient world. At certain times, it even controlled parts of Upper Egypt, expanding its influence across many regions along the Nile River. This means that cultural interaction between Egypt and Kush took place for many centuries. The story of this mysterious woman became even clearer when researchers decoded the hieroglyphs carved on the coffin. The ancient inscriptions suggest that her name may have been Takar-Hb or Takerheb. Based on the symbols and burial rituals, experts believe she may have held a fairly high status in society, possibly even a princess or a priestess. Scientists estimate that Takerheb died at around 30 years old. However, an unexpected detail was discovered during an examination of the mummy's teeth. Before her death, she had suffered from severe tooth decay. This detail shows that even individuals of high status in ancient societies faced health problems similar to those we experience today. Researchers believe that Takerheb lived sometime between the 25th and 26th dynasties of Egypt, roughly between 760 BC and 525 BC. This was a particularly fascinating period in history when Kushite kings ruled Egypt for a time. But the story does not end there. The journey of the coffin containing this mummy is also quite remarkable. It is believed that the coffin was discovered in the late 19th century, after which it was sold from Cairo to a businessman and civil servant living in the town of Aloha. The coffin was most likely found in Akhmim, a location that was once a popular stop for European travelers journeying along the Nile during the 19th century. Around 1892, the coffin was brought to Aloha. Then in 1936, it was donated to the Perth Museum, where it remains preserved to this day. And now, after more than 2,500 years, modern technology has finally brought the face of the woman who once lived along the Nile back to life. A face that tells not only the story of her own life, but also opens the door to a much larger story about the cultural connections between ancient civilizations that once flourished in our world. 7 hastily buried skeletons of Roman soldiers revealed after 1,700 years. Sometimes, great archaeological discoveries do not begin with grand expeditions or gigantic pyramids. Instead, they appear in places that seem completely ordinary. This time, the story begins in the city of Osijek in Croatia, where workers were simply building a new library for the local university. While construction equipment was digging deep into the ground at the university library site, the workers suddenly uncovered something that brought the entire construction area to a halt. It was not a treasure of gold and silver, nor sparkling ancient artifacts, but old pits in the soil containing a dark story from nearly 2,000 years ago. Experts were quickly called to the scene to investigate. At first, the pits appeared to be nothing more than old holes in the ground, but as researchers began excavating more carefully, they discovered something unsettling. The pits had once been reused as a mass grave. Inside were the skeletal remains of 7 men, stacked on top of one another, as if they had been buried hurriedly after some tragic event. Scientists immediately carried out biological anthropological analyses of the skeletons. The results showed that all of them were adult males. Among them, 4 were young adults between 18 and 35 years old, while 3 were middle-aged men between 36 and 50 years old. One detail that caught the researchers' attention was their average height, about 5 feet 8 inches. That might seem ordinary today, but in the ancient region of Pannonia, this height was considered relatively tall compared to most men of that era. However, what made this discovery truly dramatic was not their age or physical stature, but the evidence of violence preserved in their bones. When specialists carefully examined the skulls, especially the frontal bone, they noticed that all 7 skeletons bore signs of powerful blows from blunt weapons. These injuries did not appear to be accidental. Instead, they showed the typical patterns of face-to-face confrontations, such as those occurring during battle or during an execution. At this point, a major question emerged. Who were these men, and what had happened to them? To find the answer, scientists used a range of modern techniques. They conducted radiocarbon dating, physical anthropological studies, stable isotope analysis of the bones, and even extracted ancient DNA. Piece by piece, the data began to form a historical picture that had been buried for centuries. The final conclusion, produced by an international research team, made the discovery even more shocking than initially expected. According to the scientists, these 7 men were very likely soldiers of the Roman Empire. Their deaths may have been directly connected to a battle or possibly a mass execution that took place around AD 260. At that time, the powerful empire was far from peaceful. It was entering a turbulent era known as the crisis of the 3rd century. During this period, emperors were frequently overthrown, wars broke out across many regions, borders were invaded, and military rebellions occurred almost constantly. Near present-day Osijek once stood an important Roman military location where fierce conflicts likely took place. In such chaotic circumstances, the deaths of these 7 men may have been just a small fragment of a much larger battle, or perhaps the grim outcome of an internal military purge. Imagine their final moments, soldiers facing their attackers, or perhaps forced to kneel before fatal blows were delivered. Afterward, their bodies were buried quickly in old pits, without tombstones, without ceremony, and then forgotten by history for nearly 2 millennia. Only when a modern library was about to rise in the middle of the city did their story finally return to the light. Mysterious and chilling, don't you think? Sometimes an archaeological discovery is not just a few bones beneath the ground. It is a doorway into the most dramatic moments of human history. And those 7 skeletons lying quietly beneath the soil of Croatia are a reminder that the past has never truly been asleep. Don't you think so? 600-year-old fortress, hiding ancient military secrets in the Gobi Desert. In the vast golden sands of the Gobi Desert in China, where scorching winds sting the face and the horizon stretches endlessly, there stands an ancient structure that leaves anyone who sees it in awe. Not because of towering height or extravagant luxury, but because of its unusually strange shape. When viewed from above, the entire complex looks remarkably like a giant turtle lying quietly in the middle of the desert. This structure is known as Yongtai Fortress, a historic fortress built during the time of the Ming Dynasty, which ruled China from 1368 to 1644. Located in Gansu province in northwestern China, the fortress has long been known by a special nickname, the Turtle Fortress or Turtle City. Just imagine it. In the middle of the endless sands of the Gobi Desert, an ancient fortified city built in the shape of a creature that symbolizes endurance and longevity. The idea alone makes many people curious. Why would people in the past design a fortress shaped like a turtle? Fortunately, the answer is not too difficult to understand. According to experts, the design reflects both military strategy and cultural symbolism. Yongtai Fortress was built as a strategic defensive structure to protect the border region from incursions by nomadic groups from the north. During the feudal era, this region served as a critical defensive line, so military engineers designed the fortress with an extremely strong structure. The entire complex includes 12 cannon platforms positioned along the city walls, ready to defend against attacks from multiple directions. In addition, there are 4 large gate towers, located on the 4 sides of the fortress. These served both as entrances and as strategic observation points. Surrounding the entire stronghold was also a deep moat, forming a natural defensive barrier that made it more difficult for enemies to approach. And that was not all. Yongtai's defensive system was further extended by a network of beacon towers stretching dozens of miles to both the north and south. In ancient times, a single smoke signal or flash of fire from these towers could quickly transmit warnings across great distances, alerting soldiers stationed in more remote areas. Because of this close integration of architecture and defensive strategy, Yongtai Fortress is considered one of the representative examples of Chinese military engineering during the feudal period. However, what truly makes this place unique is its shape. According to Li Chongren, a conservationist who has worked with the fortress for more than 10 years, when viewed from above, the 4 gate towers resemble the 4 legs of a turtle. The narrow streets, alleys, and rows of houses inside the fortress are arranged in patterns that resemble the markings on a turtle's shell. Together, the entire layout forms the image of a giant creature resting in the desert, both unique and symbolic, representing endurance, protection, and longevity. In the past, the fortress was not only a military base, but also a living community. Historical records show that about 800 households, with nearly 2,000 residents, once lived here, forming a lively small town in the middle of the harsh desert landscape. But time and nature are often harsher than people expect. After hundreds of years, the dry climate of the Gobi Desert and its powerful sandstorms have caused many of the ancient walls to deteriorate, with cracks gradually appearing in the structure. Life here also became increasingly difficult due to prolonged droughts and severe weather conditions. As a result, many families eventually moved away in search of better places to live. From a community of thousands, today only 78 households remain living within the old fortress walls. Even so, the story of Yongtai Fortress is far from over. Recognizing the unique historical and architectural value of the site, local authorities and conservation experts are now working to strengthen restoration and preservation efforts. Wall by wall and gate by gate, the fortress is being reinforced to resist the damage caused by time. Because in the vast sea of sand in the Gobi Desert, this turtle city is not just an ancient fortress, it is also a witness to more than 600 years of history, telling the story of military ingenuity, frontier life, and the resilience of people facing the harsh forces of nature. 400-year-old vampire cemetery in Poland is forcing historians to rethink the past. Did you know that in ancient Europe, stories about vampires were not just tales told for entertainment around a nighttime fire? For many communities, they were once a very real fear. People believed that if proper precautions were not taken, the dead might rise from their graves and bring disaster to the living. Because of this belief, folklore in Poland often mentions unusual cemeteries, places where individuals suspected of being vampires were buried according to frightening rituals meant to prevent them from returning. This story has once again captured the attention of archaeologists after researchers began excavating a strange site near the old village of Pien in northern Poland. The area clearly resembled a cemetery, yet it did not appear in any historical records. There were no old maps, no church documents, and no indication that it had ever been officially recognized as a burial ground. After many years of excavation, archaeologists gradually discovered about 100 graves scattered across the site. Most of them were extremely simple, even poor in appearance, leading researchers to believe that this may have once been a burial place for poor villagers or individuals who had been marginalized by society. But a recent discovery has made the cemetery far more unsettling than anyone originally imagined. While digging into a grave that was almost completely intact, archaeologists uncovered the skeletal remains of a child between 5 and 7 years old. What shocked them was not the child's age, but the highly unusual burial position. The child's body had been buried face down, rather than lying on its back as in most traditional burial rituals. Even more strangely, a large padlock had been carefully placed at the feet of the skeleton. Hearing this, many people might ask the same question the archaeologists asked at the time: why would there be a lock in a grave? It turns out this was not the first time such an object had been discovered. Earlier excavations at the same cemetery had uncovered 2 other padlocks. However, Those earlier finds were not clearly associated with complete skeletons or were not placed in obvious positions, leaving scientists confused about their purpose. Only after the discovery of the child's grave did the mystery begin to make sense. Analysis showed that the child died about 400 years ago, and the combination of the face-down burial position and the lock placed at the feet led archaeologists to conclude that this was very likely a vampire grave. In traditional folklore across many parts of Europe, burying someone face down was believed to prevent them from returning from the dead. People once believed that if someone suspected of being a vampire tried to rise from the grave, being buried face down would cause them to dig deeper into the earth rather than climb back to the surface. In other parts of Europe, archaeologists have even discovered more disturbing anti-vampire practices. These included driving wooden stakes through bodies or placing skulls beneath the feet, methods intended to ensure that the dead could never come back to life. Returning to the cemetery in Pienne, another detail caught the scientists' attention. The burial site was not located on consecrated church land, which was very common for medieval cemeteries. This strengthens the theory that many of the individuals buried here may have been feared or rejected by their communities. Among the roughly 100 graves, many were extremely modest and likely belonged to people who were too poor to afford traditional burial ceremonies. However, the cemetery was not reserved only for the poor. Last year, archaeologists also discovered the remains of a wealthy woman at the site. During excavation, they found a golden sickle placed across her neck, clothing embroidered with gold thread. An analysis revealed that before her death, she had consumed a type of medicine containing gold, a treatment that only the upper class could afford at the time. Yet despite her wealth, the woman was still buried according to a vampire prevention ritual. And that reveals something powerful about the past. Sometimes the most frightening thing in history is not monsters or supernatural creatures, but the harsh customs that people once imposed on one another because of fear and deeply rooted beliefs. 4,000-year-old lipstick jar emerges from the soil of Iran, a beauty treasure of an ancient Middle Eastern woman. In the ancient lands of the Middle East, where many brilliant civilizations once flourished, history is sometimes revealed not through grand palaces or ancient weapons, but through small familiar objects. This time, what has amazed archaeologists is an ancient lipstick container discovered in the city of Jiroft in southeastern Iran. When people hear the word lipstick, they usually think of it as a simple beauty product used by women today. But this particular jar is very different. Researchers call it a treasure, because what scientists discovered during their analysis has forced historians to reconsider the history of ancient cosmetics. The story began in 2001, when a massive flood along the Halil River swept across the region surrounding Jiroft. The powerful floodwaters washed away layers of soil that had covered several ancient cemeteries dating back to the 3rd millennium BC. As the soil was stripped away, numerous artifacts that had been buried for thousands of years were suddenly exposed. Among the burial objects brought close to the surface was a small but extremely delicate jar. Based on its shape and where it was found, researchers believe it may once have been placed in the tomb of an ancient Middle Eastern woman. Unfortunately, once these artifacts were exposed, many looters quickly stole a number of valuable items. Fortunately, archaeologists managed to secure this remarkable jar before it disappeared from history. It took decades of study for scientists to fully understand the true value of this small object. Dating results revealed that the lipstick jar is nearly 4,000 years old, possibly dating back to around 1936 BC. At that time, many civilizations around the world were still in their early stages of development. Yet in this region, people had already learned how to create sophisticated cosmetic products, an astonishing achievement. Even more surprising to researchers was the fact that the lipstick itself still survived inside the container after thousands of years. Its color has remained a vivid reddish-orange, with sparkling particles that give it a shimmering appearance. When scientists analyzed the composition, they discovered that the cosmetic mixture was made from hematite, a red iron oxide mineral known for its bright color. The mineral had been finely ground and then mixed with other materials such as manganite and braunite to produce the final shade. But that was not all. The ancient formula also included finely crushed quartz particles, which created a glittering effect when light hit the surface. In addition, researchers detected traces of plant fibers, which may have been added to give the lipstick a subtle fragrance. Interestingly, The shimmering reddish-orange shade of this ancient lipstick happens to match one of the popular color trends in modern beauty today. In other words, after thousands of years, human taste in beauty sometimes returns to the very styles our ancestors once loved. Not only the cosmetic itself, but the container is also a remarkable piece of craftsmanship. It was carved from smooth green chlorite stone, shaped to imitate containers traditionally made from local marsh reeds, a design style that was common in everyday life in this region during ancient times. Although archaeologists have not yet identified the exact tomb where the lipstick jar originally belonged, historical sources suggest that cosmetics were extremely important to women in ancient Iran. As you can see, the ancient world is truly mysterious, isn't it? It holds secrets that are almost impossible for us to imagine, and the discoveries we just explored are perfect examples that prove exactly that. So, what do you think about these discoveries? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any other fascinating discoveries. For now, goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.